Are you a parent that has difficult days with your children? And when I say difficult, I mean it starts out that way. And then all of a sudden, you remember that you were programmed to show up as a good girl? How does a mother navigate these choices? This is the conversation that I'm in with my guest today. Welcome again, everyone. And I get so super excited about doing these things because this is all about, like it says, the lighthearted adventures of self-awareness. So I am here with the audience. I just happen to have the opportunity to speak with my guests. However, I definitely will love that you ask questions and share and comment and get involved in whatever way and wherever you're at on your journey. So my guest this afternoon is another doctor here, but Amanda Chan, because again, we want to go into the human and the doctor part, yes, but we're going to also speak to Amanda. So, Amanda, are you ready to take everyone beyond a squeeze that you've experienced or are going through right now?
Absolutely.
Good. Jump right in because, yeah, how are you today? Because I know I come in with such, hey, but how are you? How are you doing today?
Today has been such an interesting day, actually. So as kids, as most people know, kids are back to school today. So there's a different energy about it. My daughter, it was her second day at school. And, we were outside waiting for the bus. And she decides to start crying and holding on to me. And she does not want to go to school. Well, she doesn't want to get on the bus. And then the bus comes. My son gets on the bus because he's already been to school. He's fine, no problem. And she would not let go. And the bus driver is like, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to, pull her off you. And she also can't be screaming on the bus. And I said, I completely understand. Mm-hmm. So the bus drove away with my other child on the bus, but not this one.
So you now have one home for the day?
No, I drove her to school.
Yeah.
But in that moment, what I realized is I have a choice right now. I could choose to be angry, I could yell, I could be upset, or I could just acknowledge that she's having a difficult day because going to school is so hard, right? Especially for the first time. So we drove her to school, we sang songs, she was smiling when we got there. And then again, when we pulled up, she didn't want to go. But I was like, look, your brother's right there. He's been waiting for you. And she said, okay. So she went. Right. But that's the start of my day today.
Right. Well, what a beautiful start on such a hot heat wave day here in Ottawa. You opened it with such a beautiful, it's what we choose, right? Life is what we choose. And yet we weren't there always. So I hear you and I see you. And again, I know that I don't have children. However, I do know and see around me, children in the neighborhood and what's going on. And then hearing the different parent versions of what's supposedly right or wrong, right? And how do they react to it, or how do they choose differently? So wherever you are, it makes you having to change your life around too, right? Because you're a professional and you've got work and your husband and all this great stuff. So what about you? Other squeezes? And the reason I'm bringing that, because I'm like, it is about where are we now and moving through it. And what about squeezes? Or let's keep on the frame of kids, right?
Well, squeezes, it's always interesting, I find, to see, again, it's about choice, right? Who we show up as every single day, right? And it's that ability, I find, to do okay, how do I want to show up in this moment? How do I want to show up in this moment? But how do you do that when everything isn't going as planned, right? And so I used to get pulled into all of it and then go in a tornado and then come around and then be extremely exhausted and tired, because it's like, there's a wave, right? And then you get tossed and turned by the wave. Or if you're on a cruise ship and you're like, ooh, I get seasick, so I don't really like that. And then there's somehow surrendering to the wave and then being part of it, right? But it wasn't always, as you said and picked up on, it wasn't always this way. I had to reprogram myself and go back to the past and go, where did this start from? And how is it that I shift it to where I want to be?
Mm-hmm. 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 And this might be new language for some people that are listening, and others know. I mean, I certainly know how the wave works and how the body is expressing that. And I think, what I sometimes make notes when people are talking, so I'm like, oh, if that's what I want to pick up on. But when you're talking about, whatever is showing up, right? And you get to choose, right? And we always do have those moments, and yet we might choose that we do want to be, right, like the kid, right?
Yeah.
We may choose that we want to, add more positivity. Because I think for me, and I want to hear how you do it. I just know that my choosing was always be positive, because, right? Because then I didn't understand my emotions. I didn't know that my emotions weren't really my feelings in the same way, and all of this great stuff. And I was also taught to be happy, right? You can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, or be happy. And that's just, so let's talk about showing up, right? You do get to choose. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
In the showing up, like, does mom ever choose to show up, which is, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the kid today. And you could be the parent for a little bit, like, without, and hear me out, people. I don't mean, we already have enough of that, but anyway, let's go there.
Yeah. So my programming has always been show up as the good girl. That is, you need to get the good grades. You need to do what everyone else wants and be good. Don't speak too loudly, because then you won't be good. Don't have other people say anything negative about you so that you're not good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I was programmed ever since I was young.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And I always invite people, so drop, what was your expression, right? What were you taught was the thing, right? It will show up in different ways for other people. So what did you do to move through it? When did you discover this really, right?
Right. It actually wasn't until the last couple of years that I discovered it fully. And not even fully, there's always layers.
There are, people. This is a process. Your life is a process.
It is a process. Yeah. And I said, I spent my whole life trying to be good in the eyes of everybody else, and then giving up what I wanted or what I desired in order to be good. Mm-hmm. And that has not gotten me to exactly where I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what if we tried something else on? What if we tried maybe what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do, right? Maybe we say no. Maybe we say, that doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And not always yes. And not always trying to please others.
Mm-hmm. And so in some ways it's easier. I'm going to use this because we're talking boundaries and just, expressing what do we really want, and honoring what's true for us, and, having that relationship. So there's lots there. I wanted to bring it back to you being a parent, because I'm not. So it's in my own house. It's like, okay, and nobody else is around that's going to stop me, that I need to sort of compromise and negotiate with. I do that with myself, right? So let's talk about that, because I'm sure, and if you're a family, drop it. Yeah, there's not just me, there's other people. So how do you navigate that? How do you, compromise, choose that mom has mom time? How do you, right? For other parents that might help them, or just, anybody.
Well, I even find myself catching myself say to my daughter, you got to be good. And then I go, I see it. I see what has been said to me. Right? Or if she wants something and I say, oh, you can't have it. Or I've had to switch it. So instead of saying you can't have it, I tell her, you can have anything you want. It might not be in the timeline that you want it. Right? And then in terms of a behavior, because for me, I took, if I wasn't good at something, then I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. That's how I internalized it. And so I can't be bad, because then I'm not good. Like, it's a cycle for me. So what we really try and say with the kids is it's a bad behavior or a bad choice, but you're not bad. You're not a bad person. You're always going to be a good person. But so we're like, even my son the other day, you can tell when something you've said it enough when your children can repeat it. And he's like, that's a bad choice.
And I think, I need to add partially because I know for me, it's like, okay, there's another choice, right?
Yeah.
It's, because even bad, like, because what you started with was, okay, but this isn't now in this timeline or whatever. Again, not everybody understands that, right? So it's like, okay, for right now, what's a different choice? Like, and then explore, because I needed to for myself, which is explore a few different options and then choose, so that it isn't even seen as a bad thing. It's just, okay, what is another choice that we can make? I want to pull back though a little bit about, even again, back to finding mom time.
Yeah.
How does that work? Right. Again, because I think a lot of people, and we hear it certainly in society, and moms or dads, because I don't sit here as it's just moms, right? Moms or dads, they don't have time for themselves and to find that time for their own care, right? Because this is self-awareness. And if you're always surrounded by other people, where's the self for me to be self-aware while doing it? But we need both. So how does mom find time?
Yeah. So I actually get up earlier than my children, and I put an hour in for me. No one bothers me during that time. And if they come downstairs, like let's say my children wake up early, they know they can sit beside me. So I'm usually working out, so they can either join me in the workout or they can sit and watch, or they can lie down, do whatever. But mommy is working out first, and then I read, and then I journal, then I shower, and then I get everybody else ready.
Right.
So that's me time.
Yeah, you've created a pattern and a bit of a rhythm. What about when things show up at work? Because and work's part of it. We all have work, and I mean, I know what you do, and certainly share. It's around the, you as you're working, where do you sit in the? Okay, what if something arises for you? How do you navigate that? Right.
So I can see. I try and observe who I am, and when I'm pulled, let's say, out of who I know myself to be, like I can find out, like when I'm speaking, let's say, more harshly, or when I'm feeling triggered, or even like I'm like, oh, I responded in an angry way and I normally wouldn't. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a signal to me that I need like to step out of the room, to take a deep breath, or to really find something to shift what's happening in the moment. Mm-hmm. Another thing I do is I also block off 30 minutes at the end of my day, at work, at the end of my work day, before I get the kids or whatever, for a walk.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
So nice. I do 2 workouts a day. One is a workout. The second is just a walk. And that helps me calibrate. So I know every day, and I mean, you don't always get them in, but that is the rule more so than what happens. And I really find that for myself, if I can decompress and listen to some music or go for a walk and just change the way my body's moving, then I'm going to be better in all areas.
Right. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, for sure. Any other, I'm going to say, scenarios? Were you always Canadian? Because I know that's your Asian background, but were you Canadian born and raised?
I was born here, but I did live in other countries before. Mm-hmm. And so coming here, when I only knew other things, was culture shock. And it instilled in me wanting to be like other people because I was so different. Right. When I came here, there weren't a lot of Asian people here. So at school, there was only a handful of people. Mm-hmm. Right? So one being like my brother. You know?
Right. Yeah.
And then my mom would give us Asian food and it would smell, quote unquote, and my clothes would be different and all the things. And I was like, I just want to be like everybody else.
I'm so laughing here because I was born and raised Canadian. However, my And I'm going back 5 generations German. Okay. Except there were days that I'm like, how am I getting like Limburger or like things that they can't even be traded or peanut butter only? Like, and now you can't even have peanuts, but it's like, really? That's not even why do I have to eat that? Right. So I so smile because I loved having different, not just Canadian born and raised, and I'm going to use white, not that everybody's white. We know that. It's just, right, my circle and who was around me. It was like, oh my gosh, I want the interaction and the cultural diversity and the diversity, right? So it's so funny because it's its own reflection for me, which was like, wow, I always get fascinated that, other people that come, and again, of course, we all have our quirks and idiosyncrasies and nuances and whatever. Yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy because, of course, I have, I had, right, growing up, okay, you've got this sort of bigger stability or whatever else with that much family and everything else around, right? So you're navigating so many things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the big thing is when you have different cultures is like when you're here, you're missing cultures from, like, my family's in Malaysia, so I'm missing all my aunts, uncles, all the things. And then when I'm there, I don't really fit in either. So I want to be home. And you're like,
Canadian? Is that the idea? You're too Western Canadian? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, okay, I don't fit in here and I don't fit in there. And so a lot of it comes with reconciling, like, where do I belong?
And to help somebody, how do you go through that process a little bit, right? Because I think that's a great one, right?
Well, having traveled a bit and trying to leave different places and coming back and all the things, you take yourself wherever you go. And so the answer has always been to come back to your body. Right? You belong in your body because you're here.
And that's a practice for a lot of people, right? To know that they do belong. You belong in community and you belong in all these places. That's the beauty of the self-awareness, the self-discovery, the self-accepting, all of this, to be like, okay, how do I belong in that space when I feel like I don't belong in that space, right? How do I get my mind, my body, and my feelings, everything working towards the same outcome, right? So that I get to experience that if I choose it, right? And leaning into it a little bit. Yeah.
And also, it's in the contrast of the different experiences that you find out who you are, right? Because you're like, oh, I am not this or I'm not that. Mm-hmm. So then I must be something else, right? So if I didn't have the contrast, I wouldn't know which part of me I am.
And who you're choosing to be at that moment too, right?
Yes.
It goes back to the very early, right? Okay, well, it's all a choice. It's just, am I choosing even that personality, that identity, that whatever has been created, am I choosing to continue that? And what's the next sort of level? And I think so much of this it's us. That's why it's so key to come back, right? It's like, me. Like, not, and again, it's not a selfish me, and yet it has to be a selfish me so that I keep rising up in myself, in my self-expression, in the way that I want to, be a part of the world, support the world, serve clients, whatever those things are. There's so much to it, and it can be a big journey, but again, it's a process. Keep going with it, right? Yeah. So you're smiling now, which is great, and this is all about. Give us some laughs. Give us some of those, right? Because I know I already feel what's coming through here, but share with people, because I think that's always so important. How do you bring the laughter into your day? How do you bring the growth? How do you see all that on the other side of this?
Yeah. Well, so you can create a story about anything, right? So I created a story that the universe, God, nature, whatever you want to call it, is funny.
Oh, so yeah.
Anything that happens, I'm like, that's really funny.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I love it. I've never had it as that. Oh, it's them. And I would say, of course. And I'm like, and I do. I play it in that same way. I'm like, oh, I got you. I got you this time when it's.
Yeah.
And again, wherever you're at, if you don't quite get that, but I'm like, what is your way of finding the funny, right? Yeah.
Well, because so many idiosyncrasies, so many things happen that, when you think about them and then they show up, and like people that you want to run into, you just meet them, and the books you want to read, they show, like, so much of that happens that it's funny, right? Like, you wake up and you're like, of course I stubbed my toe. Of course I fell down the stair. Of course this happened, because it's funny.
And that can take time for people. And again, time, it doesn't need to, right? It can happen that fast for people. How do you do that with the kids? How do you navigate that with the kids? Because of course kids are learning, and how do you have them see the funny? If that's such a thing that you do, or...
I think kids are naturally joyful, so they find the joy in every situation, but really it is allowing them to feel whatever emotion that they're feeling. Mm-hmm. So if they're having a temper tantrum, and let's say we might remove them from the space, but it's not go to your room and you're closed in the room. They go to the room, and then I ask them, do you want mommy to stay with you, or do you want mommy to leave? Because if I'm bothering you, like if I'm the one who's triggering you, you want me to leave. But it's a choice that they have, or they could be stay, and I just stay there silently, but I'm holding space, or I'm allowing them to still kick and scream and whatever. And then we don't talk about anything until after they come back. You can see when somebody's back in their body and not reacting. So they're allowed to have their temper tantrum. They can throw themselves around. Of course, if it's a safety issue, we remove them from wherever they are. If they're hurting people, we remove them, and that's not okay. However, they're allowed to experience that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which is exactly what adults are allowed to experience. And it's so perfect how you said it. Once that's done, you can get back into your body. Now, there are ways to do it and be in your body and those things all, right? So it's different for everyone and wherever you are in your journey. However, it is exactly that, right? Because I was one. No, you escape, you do it, and you stay out there, right? Like outside the body, right? Never really understanding the energetics behind it, and this beautiful makeup of all of that we are, right? So it's, again, it's a process. It's learning more and more who we are. So
yeah, it is a process. Do you think I want to stay in the room with some 4-year-old who's throwing a temper tantrum? Not particularly. I don't enjoy it. My natural tendency is actually to run away from that. However, I root it in my nervous system that I need to be there to hold the space for them. So I stay, even though there's another part of me that wants to go. Mm-hmm. I plant myself there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, it's not fun. No one wants kids yelling and screaming and, having a temper tantrum. No, of course not.
No, but exactly how you shared. It's like you're doing both. And that becomes that beauty, right? Like that, both are going on at the same time. How do I still stay grounded and anchored in this, allow them to express, and then have that. And we need to move through these things a few times before, and many times, right? It's a practice, right? No different as you started, probably whenever you started doing your morning practice and having time alone, it probably took time to be like, oh my gosh, I gotta sit here and do this, right? Like at first it's a luxury, I'm sure. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I can hear them. Somebody needs me, right? And it's just like, keep coming back and stay in, right? Bring yourself and stay there, right?
Yeah. And it's always an evolution, right? Like a newborn isn't going to know, all right, I can't disturb mommy at this time. No.
Yeah. Right? We're teaching them and teaching ourselves at the same time, right? That's the biggest part, right? We're teaching ourselves. And I think for even somebody that's single, it's like, I can go through this. It's until you start in the physical interaction or on screen, depending where your work takes you, or your interaction with other people. It's like, it's a different thing when it's a real body. And I mean, a lot of what I do is in the energetics. So I can do it outside of it. However, it's still, we need to stay human. And I think maybe that's a great way to end this one. It's in the staying human in this world of, robotics, a little bit of picking up a lot of busyness, right? You got to instill the nervous system, like you said, and what your work anchors around, and mine in its own way. It's the, we need to keep this human part of us, which is this emotion, which is the feeling and the expressing and living life, so that we, we're raising us and raising our children and raising the future generations to be that, and have all the tech and the robotics and all that stuff too, right? So, love it. Anything else you'd like to share? Because I think we're going to wrap up. Yeah, any last words for anybody who's
Yeah.
listening?
Let's see. In the hardest moments when you want to run, and of course, if it's safe, I'm not telling you not to run from danger, but when you perceive it to be danger, see if you can give yourself like one extra split second before you take off. And that's it. That's all you got to do.
Right. Take a breath while you do it and stay and find out. Yeah, exactly. I love it. There's so much there, but I love it. Yeah. Thank you again. And for everybody that's watching, as always, thank you so much. And may you continue to keep shining, keep growing, keep giggling, all of that, because the world needs you to be you beautiful human. So we'll see you soon. Take care.